because they're speculative.
Just because someone is like a 9/11 truther or whatever, it doesn't mean they necessarily represent our interests. I mean, the whole movement's been saying it's not about right or left, it's about right or wrong, you know?
So in Towers of Deception, the media cover-up of 9/11, I devote all of Chapter 2, which is exhaustively footnoted, because if I got anything wrong, I could be pounced on like a ton of bricks. I give 26 exhibits, A to Z, as we say in Canada. And Exhibit A, in every sense of the word, is World Trade Center Building Number 7. I was in ignorance about the collapse, the sudden collapse at 5:20, the afternoon of 9/11, of World Trade Center Building 7, a 48-story structural steel building, fell at near free fall speed into its own footprint.
Building 7 was a 47-story building that came down at 5:20 p.m. on September 11th. Wasn't hit by a plane, housed offices of several government agencies, including Rudy Giuliani's command bunker, and then apparently, due to several small fires on a few floors, completely collapsed into its own footprint. There's also the fact that Building 7's collapse was reported by the BBC a full 20 minutes before it actually happened.
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city.
And the fact that the National Institute of Standards and Technology reports the collapse is unexplainable. The fact World Trade Center 7 was the furthest away from the Twin Towers, and that the other WTC buildings, much smaller than Building 7, were all directly impacted by debris from the collapsed towers, yet still survived even though Building 7 did not. There's the fact that World Trade Center leaseholder Larry Silverstein claims that Building 7 was pulled, a demolition term meaning demolished with explosives, even though those controlled demolitions take weeks of planning and preparation. Finally, there is strong speculative evidence supporting controlled demolitions in the Twin Towers as well. The film 9/11 Mysteries covers in depth the possibilities of the World Trade Center collapse as being a controlled demolition. And the excellent film Who Killed John O'Neill discusses in detail where the trails and connections lead when investigating who created Al-Qaeda, who ran security and leased the World Trade Center, how all the players, the good and bad guys, are related through corporate business, and how the counterterrorism experts may just be the real terrorists. One thing is for certain that so-called debunkers of 9/11 truth cannot deny. The government holds all the security camera tapes, all the documentation, the passenger lists, the materials of the crime, the black box recordings, and most information related to 9/11 that would exonerate themselves, silence their critics, and prove wrong the proponents who fight for full disclosure and a new investigation. But for whatever reason, and in an action that certainly would indicate guilt, they are completely reticent to release even scraps of info, despite the fact that calls to the FBI inform us that there is zero hard evidence connecting Osama bin Laden to the attacks of September 11th. He's not even wanted for the attacks on the FBI's top 10 most wanted website. It would appear that 9/11 was a multi-stage, multifaceted operation with several key goals. 1. To act as a pretext for the war on terror, which is a war on both innocent people and the liberties of citizens. 2. To act as an insurance fraud, netting Larry Silverstein a several billion-dollar return on a $124 million investment. 3. To cheaply demolish old buildings that were too expensive to renovate without having to pay for the demolition, scaffolding, or cleanup costs. 4. To earn money on several put options and stock manipulations based on foreknowledge of the events of that day. 5. To act as a public snuff film, traumatizing the public consciousness into a state of shock whereby new laws such as the Patriot Act could be easily passed and countries could be invaded without much thought or backlash. A complete psychological warfare operation. 6. to potentially cover up the evidence of both theft of gold bullion and to destroy computer evidence of several fraudulent electronic financial transactions performed in the brief time before the attacks. And 7. To enable the shifting of the paradigm of public consciousness to one of constant fear, rendering them more easily manipulated. Richard Andrew Grove is a corporate whistleblower who was almost killed the morning of 9/11. When he was due to give evidence of money laundering to his co-workers at a software firm that specialized in paperless financial transactions. Over the last 5 years, Grove has pieced together the puzzle of what happened that day and why. He's uncovered and linked some very important clues, running a podcast called 9/11 Synchronicity, and starting a media company called 8 The State, Public Media and Research. An essential listen for any serious 9/11 researcher is the Project Constellation virtual meeting recorded by Richard Grove almost 2 years ago, where he explains his story, why he's doing what he's doing, and his goals in exposing what has happened.
I mean, look at Iraq right now. There's as many private contractors are over there as there are soldiers.
Right.
And they're getting paid a heck of a lot more than what our military personnel are being paid. You know, you got Blackwater and you got all these other entities over there. And people need to remember that there are people in war who profiteers that profit greatly when war, you know, Halliburton. Take a look at what their stock has gone up since the war began and what it was before. And another interesting little thing I saw, when Bush came, right when Bush was campaigning to win in 2000, he criticized Clinton for having no energy policy. And at that time, a barrel of crude oil was $31 a barrel.
Right.
Today, it's what, as high as $111 a barrel, and that's in, you know, it's gone up 300% in less than 8 years. I would say Bush has a great energy policy, making the Saudis rich.
They have made our consciousness or our ability to view the world very small. So we're all looking through a peephole, but we think that's huge, that's all we've had. Well, I'm telling you that there's a widescreen version here. There's a big picture. And once you can take in enough pixels to start for this picture to develop, then that's an interesting cognitive process that I think a lot of people would enjoy being involved in if they only knew it existed. Because if you just go to where the news and the corporate media and the regime in power takes you, it's a very bleak picture if you understand it for what it is and can't see anywhere forward. So I think that being able to intake some of this information allows people to project forward and to be able to have headlights instead of driving in the dark.
I have a lot of questions now about 9/11. You know, first let me say, when it happened when I was governor, I regret that I went on my military tunnel vision. You know, I'm a former Navy SEAL. They told us we were attacked, and, you know, I will defend the country as my brother did and as my parents did. And I didn't question it at first. I thought that, well, how could it be? And I'm really kicking myself now because after having gone to Mexico and spending winters down there, I don't watch much TV, but I do something else. I read books. And last year I read 16 books. Now, certainly not all of them on 9/11, but I love to read history books. I don't read fiction because I have my own imagination, and I don't need some writer to try to take my own imagination from me. So I like to read history and what I consider somewhat factual books. And, you know, then I started, my son kept on my case about going to the internet and watching this loosechange.com. And so when my wife and I returned one Sunday, we decided to watch it. It takes about an hour. And I went through every emotion when I watched this. I went through anger, I went through fear, I went through crying, I went through almost getting sick to my stomach, and I started thinking back to 9/11, and my questions are simple. How can 2 planes knock down 3 buildings?
We don't want to think about those things. And when you have an event like 9/11 being showed over and over and over again, or Oklahoma City, or the 1993 World Trade Center tragedy,